Pensacola investigators say they recently found evidence from before she was even reported missing that Fountain had tampered with evidence, including deleting some of her security home footage. They were able to charge him with that until they found her body.
By pickup time, Kayla Atwood's two youngest children were still waiting. Their mother had dropped them off earlier that morning. Nothing about the start of the day looked unusual. It was a normal January morning in Pensacola, Florida. A mother handling her responsibilities, children expecting the familiar moment when she would walk back through the door. But that moment never came. No call, no message, no explanation. For the daycare, it was concerning. For Kayla's family, it was immediate alarm. Her mother, Linda Joyner, was listed as the emergency contact, and when she got the call, she knew this was not like Kayla. Her sister-in-law, Teresa, knew it too. Whatever Kayla had been through in life, she was not the kind of mother who simply disappeared from her children. At first, the case seemed to point toward a yellow Penske truck, and a man Kayla had recently met through a dating app. That was the first timeline investigators had to understand. But it was not the timeline that solved the case, because after the Penske driver cooperated, after delivery records were checked, and after investigators realized Kayla had made it back home, the story changed direction. The new focus became someone much closer to Kayla, a former boyfriend. A man who said he had moved on. A man whose connection to Kayla sounded casual when he described it, but much deeper when investigators examined the evidence. Soon, police were not only asking where Kayla went, they were asking why messages were missing, why camera footage had become part of the case, why a man claiming distance from Kayla kept appearing near the most important parts of her final timeline. This case involves domestic violence, homicide, and the death of a mother. We will keep the details respectful and non-graphic, but please take care while watching. Welcome to Behind Unreal Love Crimes. If you are new here, subscribe and tell us where you are watching from. To my returning subscribers, thank you for every like, comment, and share. Your support helps bring awareness to cases where relationships, control, and evidence all intersect. This is the case of Kayla Atwood, and the timeline investigators say Mikhail Fountain tried to erase. Kayla Atwood was 32 years old. She lived in Pensacola, Florida, and she was a mother of 4. In the transcript, Kayla is described as a hairstylist, a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a woman who had been through difficult seasons but was trying to move forward. That part matters. True crime often reduces people to the final event of their lives. But Kayla had a story before this case. She had children who depended on her. She had family who loved her. She had a personality, a past, a social media presence, and a voice. The transcript does not present Kayla as perfect, and it does not need to. She had struggles. She had past legal issues. She had painful chapters behind her. But she also spoke openly about change, growth, standards, and leaving behind the parts of life that had hurt her. By late 2023, Kayla's marriage had ended. Her unnamed husband belonged to an earlier chapter, and as the new year approached, she was navigating life as a single mother. She was also thinking carefully about relationships. Her posts during that period showed a woman taking inventory. What kind of love felt safe? What kind of attention was real? What kind of relationship was no longer worth the emotional cost? She posted and reposted about consistency, emotional maturity, partnership, respect, and leaving behind what was not meant for her. She was not stepping away from life. She was trying to rebuild it. That is what made January 3 so alarming. Kayla was not vanishing from her responsibilities. She was moving into a new year with clearer boundaries, sharper standards, and a desire to protect her peace. But someone from her recent past was still connected to her world. That person was Mikhail Fountain. In the uploaded transcript, his name appears with slight spelling variations, including Mikhail and Mikhail. Public reporting identifies him as Mikhail Fountain. He was Kayla's former boyfriend or recent romantic partner. And from the beginning, the relationship itself became one of the most important parts of the case. Fountain tried to minimize it. When investigators spoke with him, he said they had broken up. He said he had moved on. He suggested he had too many other women to be focused on Kayla. He talked as if she was no longer important to him. But his own statements showed a different level of access. He talked about spending time with Kayla and her children. He discussed buying Christmas gifts. He described being around the family. He mentioned a Santa Rosa Beach outing. He talked about helping with the children in ways that showed he knew parts of Kayla's daily life. That is the contradiction at the heart of this case. He claimed distance. The evidence showed access. In relationship homicide cases, access matters. Familiarity matters. Routine matters. The person who knows where someone lives when their children go to daycare, who they are seeing, and what their day usually looks like can become central to understanding the final hours. By early January, Kayla was also meeting new people. One of those people was Antonio, a Penske delivery driver she had connected with through the dating app Tagged. On that app, Kayla used the profile name Pretty Pretty. Antonio would become the first major public lead. But he would not become the answer. On the morning of January 3, 2024, Kayla dropped her two youngest children off at daycare. The day began normally enough. But by the time pickup came, Kayla was gone from contact. Her children were still waiting. The daycare reached out to Linda Joyner, and Linda had no explanation. Teresa and other relatives knew immediately that something was wrong. Kayla's sisters, her aunt, and other family members became part of the urgent search for answers. The transcript says, the family went to Los Pensacola Police Department to file a missing person report, but were initially turned away. It was not until January 5 that the report was officially accepted and the investigation formally opened, according to the transcript. That delay is important because it explains the family's frustration. They knew something was wrong before the system fully caught up. Once investigators began working the case, surveillance footage came forward, showing Kayla near a yellow Penske truck in the area of West Belmont Street. Public descriptions of Kayla were released, including her height, weight, hair, tattoos, piercings, and a distinct mole, because at that point, the public was being asked to help find her. The yellow truck became the first thing people could point to, but visible does not always mean central. The driver of that truck was Antonio. According to the transcript, Antonio had met Kayla through Tagged and knew her only by the name Pretty Pretty. He came in voluntarily, answered questions, gave investigators access to his phone, and provided delivery records. That cooperation mattered. Antonio told investigators he had helped Kayla get her two youngest children to daycare that morning, he said. Kayla then rode with him on part of his delivery route. Around 2:30 that afternoon, that drop-off changed the direction of the case. Because if Antonio dropped Kayla back home, then the yellow Penske truck was not the end of the timeline. It was only the first public lead. Antonio also shared a detail from the day before, he said. He had been near Kayla's apartment when a white pickup truck pulled alongside him, and the driver looked directly at him through the window. That detail did not solve the case by itself, but later it became harder to ignore. Once Antonio's timeline held, investigators had to look at what happened after Kayla came home. And that is when the case stopped being about where Kayla had been seen and started being about what someone did not want seen. Public reporting later stated that after Kayla was dropped home, video showed her getting into a pickup truck, matching one associated with Fountain. Police also said Kayla and Fountain exchanged messages on January 3. After that window, Kayla's phone activity became a major concern. The transcript and reporting connect Kayla's phone to the North G Street area, the same general area associated with Fountain. The transcript specifically mentions the 400 block of North G Street in connection with where Kayla's phone was last detected, and Fountain also discussed his own movements around North G Street. This is where the second timeline begins. The first timeline was the yellow Penske truck. The second timeline was the pickup truck, the phone activity, the missing messages, and the camera footage. If you are following the timeline, comment timeline below, because in this case, the timeline became one of the most important witnesses. Before Kayla's disappearance was widely public, Fountain allegedly went to a neighbor's home asking to see doorbell camera footage. He reportedly told the neighbor he believed Kayla had been taken against her will. That detail became one of the biggest red flags in the case. At that point, according to the transcript, no official report had been filed and nothing had been made public. So investigators had to ask, how did Fountain already know enough to be asking about footage? When investigators later obtained access to the neighbor's camera system, a significant portion of the January 3 footage had been wiped. The transcript says only 2 people had accessed that system, the neighbor and Fountain. Then came the phone. Investigators looked at Fountain's messages, and every text between him and Kayla had been deleted. His explanation was that he cleared things out when they stopped talking. He presented it as normal after a breakup, but police were not looking at that in isolation. They were looking at a missing woman, a former boyfriend, a recent text exchange, a pickup truck, a phone location, a neighbor's camera system, and deleted communication. Kayla's name was also not saved plainly in Fountain's phone. The transcript discusses labels such as WB and a reference to KP. Those labels do not need to become their own separate mystery, but they show how investigators were trying to understand what had been saved, what had been removed, and how Fountain identified Kayla in his phone. This is where the evidence became less about one dramatic clue and more about a pattern. Fountain had explanations. Investigators had records. During the interview, Fountain tried to build a version of events that distanced him from Kayla. He said they were broken up. He said she was still married. He said he had already moved on. He said he had no shortage of women, but the transcript shows he also admitted to being involved in parts of Kayla's life. He said he had taken her children to daycare. He said he had bought Christmas gifts for the kids. He said the family had gone to a cookout at Santa Rosa Beach. He also said he had given Kayla money after meeting her on Tagged in December. That is not how a complete stranger appears in a timeline. That is how someone with recent access appears. Fountain's interview also wandered into his claimed movements and side explanations. He mentioned his mother, his girlfriend's mother, and a police contact he claimed to know in Escambia County. He talked about work and mentioned Steve Powell, a property owner or landlord-type person he claimed to work for, as well as Steve Powell's father. He discussed places including North G Street, Jackson Street, and Mexican Avenue. He also mentioned side details involving Kayla's family, including Binky, referenced in connection with a dog at Kayla's home. Those details are not central evidence on their own, but they belong in the broader completeness picture because they show how many names and explanations entered the interview. Once investigators began asking him to account for time, movement, phone calls, and contact. For the documentary, we do not need to replay the entire interrogation. The original transcript includes long, rambling sections. What matters is the contradiction map. Fountain said they broke up, but he had been involved with her children. He said he did not keep tabs on Kayla, but he was asking about surveillance footage before the case was public. He said he had moved on, but investigators were looking at communication from January 3. He explained, away, deleted messages, but those messages were between him and a missing woman. He tried to shift attention toward Antonio, but Antonio cooperated and was later cleared. He denied seeing Kayla that day, but public reporting says police pointed to video of Kayla getting into a pickup truck connected to Fountain. One of the most striking details from the transcript is not a confession. It is what investigators noticed was missing from his behavior. Fountain did not ask whether Kayla was okay. That alone does not prove guilt. But in a relationship homicide investigation, behavior after a disappearance can become part of the picture. Who is calling? Who is helping? Who is searching? Who is cooperating? Who is distancing themselves? Who is checking cameras? Who is deleting records? By January 9th, investigators had enough to take action on the evidence issue. Fountain was arrested on a felony charge connected to evidence tampering. The charge was tied to the deleted messages and the surveillance footage issue. A judge set bond at $50,000, and Fountain posted bond. He walked out once, but the case was still moving. Kayla had not yet been found, and investigators were still working. The search expanded across agencies and support groups. The Pensacola Police Department worked alongside the Escambia County Sheriff's Office, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the State Attorney's Office, the Legacy K-9 Search Team, and C2R Ministries. The Legacy K-9 Search Team became especially important because it helped narrow the search area. Chief Eric Randall later explained that the dogs helped focus investigators instead of forcing them into a much broader search. On January 11, 2024, Kayla was found in a wooded area in Escambia County, near Fairfield Drive and Crow Road, with Stowe Road also appearing in the transcript's search area description. This script will not describe that scene graphically. Authorities did not publicly release every forensic detail, and we are not going to speculate beyond what investigators and reporting confirmed. What matters is what the discovery meant. After January 11, investigators no longer had only a missing person case. They had a homicide case. In the early hours of January 12, police went to bring Fountain back into custody. This time, the charges were connected to Kayla's death. The transcript and reporting also mention additional charges at the time, including battery and resisting arrest. This time, no bond was offered. After Kayla was found, local coverage began discussing the case through the lens of domestic violence and relationship homicide. Chief Eric Randall said jealousy may have been a suspected motive. But jealousies alone does not explain a case like this. Jealousy becomes dangerous when it is tied to control, entitlement, and the belief that another person does not have the right to move on, where reporter Yona Gavino covered that part of the story. In the broadcast segment, anchor Bob introduced the wider issue, and Yona spoke with Marcia Travis, the program director of Favor House, an organization that supports domestic violence victims. The key point from that coverage was power and control. This was not about romance. It was about control. Kayla was trying to move forward. She was dating. She was setting standards. She was leaving old pain behind. And investigators believed jealousy over her new connection played a role in what happened. That is what makes this a relationship homicide case. It is not only about the final day. It is about access before the final day. It is about the person who knew her routine. It is about the way a former partner reacted when she was moving on. It is about what was deleted, what was denied, and what investigators rebuilt. The transcript also included a wider domestic violence context by naming other local cases. Keitha G. was mentioned in connection with the fatal shooting of Brooklyn Sims, the mother of his young child. Another Pensacola case involved Kyton Faircloth and Carla Williams, connected to violence against an ex-girlfriend at Pensacola Fitness. Those cases are not Kayla's story, and they should not take over this documentary. But they show why local advocates and reporters saw Kayla's case as part of a broader pattern. Relationships where control becomes danger. After the arrests and public updates came the grief. Kayla's family and friends gathered to remember her. A balloon release was held at 12th Avenue Park, where loved ones came together in her memory. Public reporting identified Kayla Atwood as Kayla's cousin, one of the relatives who spoke about how deeply Kayla was missed. Kayla's close friend also posted a tribute. Her mother Linda, her sister-in-law Teresa, her sisters, her aunt, her cousin Angelia, her children, and the rest of her family became part of the aftermath. That aftermath matters. A criminal case moves through charges, hearings, evidence, verdicts, and sentencing. But families live with the consequences long after the court calendar ends. For Kayla's 4 children, this was not a headline. It was the loss of their mother. For Linda, it was the loss of a daughter. For Teresa and the rest of the family, it was the confirmation of the fear they felt from the beginning. Kayla had not chosen to leave. The case eventually moved into court. Some courtroom details remain limited in the public reporting available for this script. The individual prosecutors, defense attorneys, judge, and full witness list are not clearly confirmed in the transcript or the reliable public reports reviewed, so we will not invent names or dialogue. What is confirmed is the outcome and the evidence themes reported after the verdict. In January 2026, a jury convicted Mikhail Fountain of second-degree murder in Kayla Atwood's death. By the time the case reached court, the question was no longer whether Kayla had vanished by choice. The question was whether the timeline proved who was responsible. Public reporting identified several major evidence themes. Police said Fountain deleted texts, denied seeing Kayla that day, and ultimately provided a false police report. Reporting also stated that neighbors told police Fountain came to their home after picking Kayla up and asked to see surveillance footage, which is when he allegedly deleted video files. The Penske driver was cleared. And before that, Kayla had been seen getting into the yellow Penske truck, then, later, into a pickup truck connected to Fountain. The jury did not need a confession. They had the sequence. Kayla started the day by dropping off her children. The yellow Penske truck became the first public lead. Antonio cooperated and was cleared. Kayla made it back home. The timeline then shifted to Fountain's pickup. Messages were missing. Camera footage became part of the case. Phone activity pointed investigators to an area connected to Fountain. His statements did not settle the questions, and eventually, the case moved from disappearance to prosecution. On February 10, 2026, Fountain was sentenced to life in prison without parole. That is the latest confirmed legal status from the reliable sources reviewed. I did not find a confirmed public appeal update, so the case should currently be described as resolved by conviction and sentencing, unless future verified court records show a change. But a sentence does not restore what was taken. Kayla Atwood's story did not begin with a crime. It began with a woman trying to move forward. She was a mother of 4, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a woman with a past, a voice, and a future she was still shaping. What happened to her should never be reduced to simple jealousy or relationship drama. Jealousy may be part of the investigator described, but the deeper issue was control. The belief that someone else's independence was a threat. That is why this case matters, because before the conviction, before the sentence, before the final legal outcome, there was a mother who did not come back for pickup. There was a family that knew immediately something was wrong. There was a first lead that looked obvious, and then there was a second timeline, quieter, closer, and far more revealing. The yellow Penske truck drew attention. Antonio's cooperation shifted it. The pickup truck, the missing messages, the camera footage, the phone activity, and the contradictions narrowed it. And in the end, the jury did not need a confession. They had the sequence. Mikhail Fountain was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. But Kayla's life was more than the case that carried her name. She was not just evidence. She was not just a headline. She was someone her children expected to see at the end of the day. Thank you for giving Kayla's story your attention. Share this case with someone who believes true crime should go beyond the headline. And subscribe to Behind Unreal Love Crimes for evidence-based stories about relationships, warning signs, and the lives behind the cases. Kayla's case was solved because the timeline survived what someone tried to erase.